Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lecture on ways of seeing art, digital media, and visual culture. This is Anushray, and today we'll be talking about visual cultures. So, before we jump in, as you can see on my title card, I have the Mona Lisa, but this is a silk screen painting, sort of this rendition by Andy Warhol in 1963. If people who are not familiar with Andy Warhol, I feel this is a great lecture to actually jump into his sort of uh, eccentric way of sort of responding to a lot of art and culture and a lot of visual ideas that has shaped a lot of decades, specifically the 60s, 70s, and leading up to the digital modern age of 2000s. All right, so the first question that I pose everyone is, what is visual culture? So culture is definitely a more abstract umbrella term, but then when we actually pile on or add the term visual to it, what does it even mean? Like, how do we able to sort of combine these two things together and then sort of extrapolate and then sort of derive meaning from it? So, visual culture is this concentrated area of study which is sort of concerned with a very broad scope of images and image makers. So the one of the photos that I'm sharing is the calligrapher, and this calligrapher is definitely is more well versed with Islamic and more Middle Eastern traditions, and the idea is that visual culture doesn't really concern itself just with the image. So, for example, you can see this calligraphy, beautifully calligraphy based uh, piece, but then you can't really separate the visuality of the piece that's in front of you from its maker. And also, when you talk about who is actually making that, you also have to sort of figure out that this person or this artist also is part of a traditional or a cultural vocation that sort of creates image makers. So visual culture concerns us with images and also image makers. So you can't just read Mona Lisa in a vacuum. You have to see who created Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci, but also what were the processes that created Leonardo da Vinci. So image and image maker. So that's a study, and we concern ourselves with the uh, more conceptual as well as uh, more broad in perspective of visuality and on the images that surround us. Moving on, we definitely want to talk about famous paintings that are found in art galleries, and these are a subject of visual cultural inquiries. Now, as I was talking about the Mona Lisa is a painting that literally I believe everyone is familiar with. So, if people are not familiar with Mona Lisa, it's a painting that was painted in 1503 by the great Leonardo da Vinci. And as you can see, on my slide, I have this rendition by Andy Warhol in 1963, which is almost this sort of eccentric and also this sort of rendition of an original piece. Now, in 63, this was very unique that Andy Warhol was able to sort of uh, sort of like put a spin on the mass consumption of Mona Lisa, because 63 the main medium of how people used to interact with Mona Lisa, because not everyone can go to Paris in Louvre to actually see Mona Lisa. They would see it on newspapers, on pamphlets, on print medias, on a lot of postcards, a lot of print copies that people used to put on their houses, on their studios, in public spaces. So Andy Warhol was surrounded by the image of Mona Lisa, and then he was like, okay, I'm an image maker. How can I sort of talk about and also show these icons that I grew up with? So hence a silk screen painting rendition by Andy Warhol in 63. And visual cultures changes every decade and every century. So every decade there is a conversation of the images that we have sort of been introduced with, and then how we as an artist or audiences or even consumers are able to then become image makers, or at least pass it on. The biggest example is definitely the meme culture of this decade and as well as the past decade, since internet became a household phenomena. And more examples of Mona Lisa. I'm pretty sure like people here scrolling on Instagram or just maybe going through Pinterest or over the internet have seen different renditions of Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa is an image that has been set in stone. It is part of the human tradition, right? It's almost like, oh, Mona Lisa is one of the most famous paintings out there. But then, as an artist, as an image maker, you put Mona Lisa through a filter of your sensibilities, so you can see 3 Mona Lisa renditions, all done in different style, depending on the choices of the image maker in question. Alright, the second painting that I want to talk about is the Starry Night, another iconic painting by Vincent van Gogh, 1889. And yeah, like, I am positively sure that most of you have interacted or have sort of seen a painting like this, perhaps on a t-shirt, on a postcard, I don't know, in your friend's place, somewhere, sort of pinned on to a board. This is, you can't really like, you can't have just like gone through life without seeing this painting. Again, I'm not saying that maybe some of you have been seeing this for the first time. At least growing up, I've seen this literally everywhere. Alrighty. Now, Vincent van Gogh, an iconic image maker, an iconic painter, and then there is this image of this exhibition, not exhibition, like this sort of multimedia sort of rendition, which was titled The Loom. So this was this permanent installation that used 150 digital projectors to reflect nearly 3,000 images of this of Van Gogh's paintings onto walls, ceilings, floors of this museum's gallery, right? So as you can see, they haven't really like created something new, but what they did is they used this iconic image that is sort of present in everyone's memory and in all of our collective memories. So we know what this is. That's why we have a connection with it. But then the curator and the technicians who worked here and the engineers, what they did is they used existing technologies of 2020s to actually create this beautiful sort of rendition that is futuristic, that is sort of typical of the technologies that we have right now, to just sort of expand this beautiful visual world of Van Gogh. All right, so Piet Mondrian, we have definitely discussed about this in our minimalist classes, on our lecture classes on minimalism. If that's something you have missed, Piet Mondrian, one of the most prominent figures of the earlier of the 20th century, when minimalism was sort of became this unique art genre. I want to say, but sort of an art movement that was that influenced fashion, that influenced architecture, interior designing, and also a lot of graphic design sensibilities that we even see today. So Piet Mondrian had this unique spin, very basic, right? Composition with large red, plain, yellow, black, gray, and blue, 1921. But this also became an inspiration for the luxury fashion house Yves Saint Laurent, and they did credit Piet Mondrian for this iconic sort of homage to him. So visual culture and image that was Piet Mondrian's work that sort of like became very iconic in the earlier 20th century as beacon of this new sort of minimalistic art framework where simplicity and also geometrical patterns and also this idea of that art can be very simplistic, can also be bare essentials, and then that also inspired Yves Saint Laurent to create a very unique fashion line. So visual culture is how there's a study of the image and the image maker in conversation. All right. So as I was talking about and thinking about what would be something that's a very topical discussion point for this conversation is definitely that asking this question with this meme. It's an old meme now, so it's almost dating the video. Is this visual culture? Memes. Are memes visual culture? in most of my in-person sessions, I get resounding yes. So I'm hoping that people are nodding their head. Yeah, definitely. Memes are part of our visual culture. All right, I quickly wanna just go through these three bullet points that I feel sets images as active players. So uh, again, I'm gonna butcher the French pronunciation, so I'm just gonna use the anglicized version, the Henri Cartier-Bresson. I should be, yeah. Anyways, so Henri Cartier-Bresson, he is definitely one of the most iconic photojournalists out there. If people are not familiar with this name, so sort of just uh, reading his work, he again, this photo that I'm showing on my course slide is taken in 1932. So sort of just being studying Henri Cartier-Bresson's work. So the idea is that images as an active player can make us question what we think we know. Um, it can definitely cause a new this sort of new understanding and also ways of seeing around the world, and they can actually give us information. So for example, when you look at this image, so first it questions what we think we know. Okay, what's happening? Is this person flying? Is this a dreamscape? Like, is it dystopic sort of vision? Like, I don't get it. So it definitely makes me question and make me think we know. This image might not be the best example for that, but humor me, please. Uh, it definitely gives me information about, okay, there's a shadow, there's a person, there is like a pool of water around, there is construction going on. It's like a lot of things that's happening. There's a lot of information that's coming my way, right? Just by looking at this image. And also like the way I see the world. Oh wow, Henri Cartier-Bresson is really interested in shapes. They're like odd shape of this person jumping. And the way Henri Cartier-Bresson was interested in capturing this moment in time as well. So that's pretty interesting to me. And all the shapes of the components and all the ladder and all those things that's around and all the reflection. So it's just like a moment in time and space, and it definitely gives us information. And also all these 3 points as an active player that we can actually imagine through looking at this specific visual. All right, this is a great link, guys. These are the 24 most famous photos ever taken. So please go through them, and this might also help sort of, I don't know, further our conversation about the visual cultures. All right, so one of the photos that I've picked from this list is again this photo. Like you don't have to be born. Okay, I wasn't born in '68, right? But when I look at it in 2025, I get it. This is Earth. And this photo is taken from the moon. So by the crew of Apollo 8. And this actually photo is the first this unique image. And it became the first sort of the Apollo crew became the first humans to leave Earth's orbit and venture into space, and they were able to capture the surface of the moon as well as our planet, our home, Earth, from here. So this became an iconic image of the space age, and it's one of the most influential photos of all time, right? So it's the visual, the imagery, the context, and also the image makers. And the image makers for this was the crew of Apollo 8, the first humans to actually ever set foot on the moon. Now, the question that arises is what makes a photo part of the visual culture that we are sort of having a conversation about? So, as I was interested in talking about images as active players, so it definitely has to. So, for an image to be in conversation of being part of our visual culture, it has to represent specific information. So, this image represents a specific information. Oh, Earth, Moon, very specific information, right? It should be the only photo that is used to depict that thing. So this photo is literally so unique that like, okay, we got it. Like a photo taken from the moon by a human. So it's the only photo that is used to depict that one thing. Again, these are the rules to make a photo really influential. So that's why, again, these are not like rules set in stone, but some of the ideas I've picked up. And 3, widely sentimentalized in collective culture, images that have emotions. Like these are the images that just like are like a cultures really hail to it, right? Every culture would have different images. So it's like images of Michael Jackson is widely celebrated because he's one of the most iconic pop stars. These days, it might be Taylor Swift, perhaps. These days, uh, yeah, in Canadian context, I'm trying to think of an example in terms of Canadian context. I'm drawing a blank, sorry, guys. Anyhow, so these are three of the ideas, and definitely play around with them. And definitely, I'll put this in a discussion thread for me to sort of see how everyone engages with these ideas. All right, one of the photos that I use is this is an image of Che Guevara. And people who are not familiar, he was a Cuban revolutionary. This simple portrait image, this is one of the most basic portrait image of a public figure, but this became so iconic that you see this on t-shirts, on merchandise, literally everywhere. So that's why it fulfills all these roles, all these 3 points that I just mentioned. So iterations of the original image and how visual culture, as you can see. So this just simple portrait photo became this fuel to the fire, and it's just everywhere. Now, I'm not sure if people have seen. So anyone who has been to New York, they have or maybe have seen movies that are based on New York. They have seen the iconic bull in front of the Wall Street. So the artist Kristen Wispel, they were able to create this fearless girl statue in front of the bull, and it became a symbol for female empowerment. And then different iterations. The idea is that you create an image and you create a body of work and artwork, and people over the internet around the world, they can create iterations that can sort of capture the emotive nature of that image. So images are just not information, but they can be widely sentimentalized. That's a tongue twister. They can actually have really high charged emotions. More iterations, very interesting. All right, this is one of my favorite images. I don't know if people who are listening to this video, they know who the Beatles are. If not, Beatles, there are some living members still. Beatles was this iconic band, like one of the biggest rock bands in human history. So this was taken in September 1969. This is the album cover for their iconic album Abbey Road, and this is just an image, right? It's just an image depicting the music album they created in 69, but it becomes so huge that it was everywhere. So the image was insered into our sort of visual cultural landscape, and that's why a lot of image makers, as you can see, The Simpsons, again, people who are not familiar with The Simpsons, one of the most famous animated shows of all time, and as you can see, iterations. Visual culture moves and evolves with one image, and then it just morphs into these different unique ideas onto themselves. This is so funny. I just found this over the internet. It's just like, okay, these people, I'm gonna assume that wherever this photo is taken, I'm assuming this is taken in India because I'm from India, so I definitely have some context of the landscape. But these four guys, definitely, I'm not sure they are the demographic that listens to the Beatles, but the photographer, they just had a sense of humor and maybe requested them to pose for them like this in front of the Beatles poster. Yeah, very fun. All right, in terms of Canadian context, I want to talk about the Tim Hortons logo because I feel that logos, and definitely this was a discussion that we had in one of our in-person sessions about logos. Tim Hortons, definitely very iconic. If you are from Canada, if you have been to Canada, you have seen this iconic coffee chain. And Tim Hortons definitely has evolved from its iconic original logos that sort of shows that, we are this neighborhood cafe that Canadians go to this more commercialized, more pan-Canadian sort of identity. So Tim Hortons, as you can see, there are a lot of artists across Canada who have Canadian Goose. For people who don't know this, iconic symbol, and also literally everywhere in Canada. So Canadian Goose drinking Tim Hortons, and also beautiful, very interesting watercolor poster watercolor rendition of a Tim Hortons drive-through. Alrighty, guys, so now we have arrived to our first class activity. So I want you guys to make a list of images uh, uh, th- that relate to you. We have done an exercise like this, but I'd want you guys to think of logos, advertising, data visualization, works of art, film adaptations of novels, whatever makes sense to you. Like, you don't just have to pick an image that's just an art piece. It could be any image that just makes sense to you, that screams visual culture to you. So the questions are: can you think of specific examples of this type of image? What does it look like? What details really stand out in your memory? Where did you see it? How does it make you feel? Can you find the iterations easily? Now, this is very important. For example, let's say you pick, for a lack of better example, uh, let's say you pick this very random flavor of Cheetos, right, that you grew up eating. Can you find a connective tissue or a thread of artists or people who have some connection with those specific Cheetos flavor and the iconic image that goes with it? Can you find the iterations easily? So if you do share it. You don't have to look for something that just logos and advertising. It could be literally anything that has connection to you and that uh, sort of connects to our conversation here about visual cultures. Anyhow, all right, I want to talk about visual cultures, moving away from the discussion just to very Canadian or Western context to just the world culture. So one of the most popular Chinese paintings that I found was this. So the English title is Dwelling in the Fuchun Mountains. Uh, as you can see, this is considered as one of the most popular painting in China. So there is definitely elements of visual culture that are very interesting and historically significant. And then, just to have that conversation going on, I found these two different photos from the East Asian cultures. One on the left is depicting the ancient era, and the one on the right is about modern era. So the idea is that even though, like, in a culture, so culture evolves. So definitely, as you can see, within the ancient era, there is a different sensibility and different materials that were available to in modern era. Even though, like, this is very the symbols that are used are very typical of East Asian culture, but there is this more modern take to it, and cultures don't grow in vacuum, but they definitely sort of find inspiration from around. All right, so in East Asia, in China, modern art is informed by traditional Chinese ink and the compositional styles of Chinese alphabets and histories, as you can see in this image. Again, I'm no expert, just to have more diverse examples and to have this conversation sort of have a better global and historical perspective. So I feel that these are some of the paintings that I find fascinating and should bring them in our conversation about visual cultures. So the question is, how does modern East and Southeast Asian art uses their rich cultural influences? So that's a question I pose, right? Now, I wanna bring everyone's attention to this great artist that I found. Again, I'm gonna butcher their name. So it's Mai Trung Tu. Again, I know, butchering their name. I apologize in advance. So his name in painting is associated with silk paintings on the theme of women, children, daily life under the colonial, sorry, under the colonial and as well as sort of colorful view of East Asian culture. So he has been able to use East Asian visual culture and respond to the visual culture of the West. So as you can see, Mei Trung Tu, the artist, was definitely very inspired by classical Western paintings. So the painting to the left is La Grande Odalisque by Jean-Auguste Dominique. Again, butchering their pronunciation, sorry about that. And this is the rendition by Mei Trung Tu. Can you see that he definitely, as an image maker, he is definitely paying homage to the original image that was made in 1814 and he made it in 1970s. He was definitely inspired by the Western canon, the Western body, or the Western art that, like, was pivotal to him when he was educating himself as an artist. But then he is bringing a lot of visual elements and visual culture that influence uh, his sort of perspective, uh, his own Southeast Asian perspective in this conversation. So Mae Trung Thu's sort of cultural upbringing has been both a mixture of French and Vietnamese culture, because Vietnam was had a history of French colonial conquest. So as you can see in his work, that it has these beautiful visual snippets and cultures of Vietnam, but also he was very much influenced by French art and cultural conversations and education. All right, now this brings our conversation of visual culture into third space. So, third place, not space, refers to the social surrounding that are separate from our two usual social environments. Number one, home, that's your first place, and the workplace, that's your second place. The workplace could, right now, for people who are students right now, the workplace could be your university campus, it could be, yeah, it could be whatever, and it could be someone who is gainfully employed, it could be a workspace. So you move from home and you go somewhere. But the in between space, that could be public, virtual, formal, work, global, private, asynchronous, like this class, a school campus, synchronous, local, informal, recreation, physical, off campus, could be your third space or your third place. So the third space is this post-colonial sociolinguistic theory. That's a handful. So I'm going to put a pin on that because that doesn't really concern our conversation. That's a conversation that's that's I wanna say don't wanna say more advanced, but more relevant to academic researcher. So that's why I'm just not really wanna expand on that. So this has been attributed to Homi Bhabha. So where he says the third space theory explains the uniqueness of each person, like you and me, and actors in context of hybrid. So it's like we are hybrids of all these different cultural sensibilities. So Mae Trung Tu, again from butchering his name, I'm pretty sure, uh, is a hybrid of Vietnamese and French colonial culture. And similarly, you have to think about you as a unique person. What are the different things that creates this unique combination of who you are and how you see the world? So that's why the term hybrid, third space theory. So as you can see, this is known as a Venn diagram. So the first circle, and this is the Venn diagram for Mae Trung Tu, is that the first circle depicts their Vietnamese and Southeast Asian visual culture, and then it intersects with the French and Western culture, and then in the middle, that's the third space that the artist is operating from. That's the intersection of French and Vietnamese culture. And more Venn diagrams. So in terms of contemporary Canadian art, it is an intersection of the indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge. And then you have the third cultural space, which is this unique hybridization of the knowledge that the indigenous community had preserved and held, and the Western canon, sort of like studying it, and then there is an intersection of it in the way that we see that work in a lot of gallery spaces. All right, another great artist, and this is an artist that that definitely influenced me as someone who grew up in India. So this is M.F. Hussain, Maqbool Fida Hussain. So he was this Indian artist, really popular for knowing for his bold, vibrant color narratives and his modified Cubist style that has its sort of Picasso influence by Pablo Picasso. And he was one of the most celebrated and internationally recognized Indian artists of the 20th century. So if we extrapolate and use the theory of third space to study M.F. Hussain, we'll see his Indian and South Asian visual culture, the way he grew up in India, his way of seeing art through an Indian visual culture perspective, intersecting with the Western visual culture perspective, because he was really influenced by Pablo Picasso and the art from the West, and the way he created art was... Alrighty. So as you can see in M.F. Hussein's work, uh, it's Indian religious iconography meets Picasso's cubism. Very unique, very interesting, and very yeah. That's why some artists are unique because they are so authentic, and that's why the third space theory can be used to sort of study them. Some artwork from M.F. Hussain. So this one, Indian colonized memory from British imperialism meets American pop art, influenced by a lot of influences all over, and you can see this uniqueness of Mr. M.F. Hussain. All right, as you can see, I definitely have put a conversation idea. I don't really want to like expand on it because I feel this is so dense. So I would rather would want to just talk about how different art and different ideas can sort of commingle together to create this third space that is super unique, and that's why different artists can be celebrated because they can actually become image makers that talk about visual culture that have influenced them and they grew up with. Some lovely example of how different culture interact to create something interesting. So as you can see, on the left, it's an ad from India, but it's definitely very westernized, Indian motifs, but very westernized, and also one from East Asia. That's sort of it's an ad for Coca-Cola, an American brand, but in a very East Asian style. So different visual culture intersecting with each other. All right, this is a great video. This is a great video by Tomokazu Matsuyama, and they talk about appropriation in art, how they create art based on intersection of their different sensibilities. So this will also be part of a discussion board. So please do have a look. And the question is how, after you watch this video, how Tomokazu Matsuyama appropriates images to create fine art. All right, now one of our class activity that you will be seeing on a discussion board is that you guys have to make a Venn diagram of an artist of your choice and then highlight 2 points of influence as shown in other Venn diagrams or many Venn diagrams in this course slide, and to show hybrid intersections of these influences, the third space. So this is part of your class exercise. Alrighty, guys. I feel we covered a lot of topics, and I feel I definitely don't really want to overwhelm anyone with a lot of information. So please do go through the course slide as references. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was an informative sort of session for a lecture session for everyone. So yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you, and yeah, maybe talk to you all in our next lecture video. Take care.